Welcome to Generating Gratitude, a look at personal growth in a grateful life. What follows is not professional advice or medical recommendation, but stories and perspectives about living with gratitude. Now, here is your host, Joe Volk.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another blazing edition of Generating Gratitude here on WSGW. I'm Joe, your host. Grateful to be with you. Grateful to the folks at Connoisseur Media here in Saginaw for letting us do this show about gratitude. And it's like we start off every show. Can't be hateful and you can't be grateful at the same time. Every day, every minute, you have a choice. You can look at the positive, be grateful, or you can look at the negative. It's all up to you. It's one of the few choices that everybody has every minute of every day. And my first guest, Domingo Delgado, Mision of Saginaw. Domingo, grateful that you're on the show. Explain a little bit about your organization.
Good morning, Joe, and thank you for having us, and good morning to all your listeners there. Again, I am Domingo Delgado, the VP from Mision. It's a nonprofit organization here in Saginaw, Michigan. In short, what we do is request new, lightly used materials, clothing, household goods, just things that people are not using anymore. And then we go and deliver them to people who are in need of, said materials. Everyone has different obstacles in life and things that they face. We've dealt with all kinds of stuff from house fires to issues with people leaving abusive relationships and things like that. People starting over in life for whatever reasons, they have. We don't require any kind of background story or anything like that. And, we don't really have this red tape that we have to go through for, said individuals. It's just we basically cut to the chase and they let us know like what they need. Sometimes they give us their stories and whatnot. Again, it's not required, but I mean, if they want to share, a lot of times they just need a listening ear sometimes for someone to, hear them out and, to just maybe vent off sometimes.
And Domingo,
those are the things that we do.
Domingo, I love your organization because it's basically gritty, street level, one person helping another person. And
definitely,
no bureaucracy, no red tape, because in any society, people are hurting. And the best way is just one person helping another person. And that's basically what your organization does.
Yeah. Yep. In short, yep.
And how much Saginaw has, like every other place in the world, has people in need. Explain how your organization, how do you help those people? Because not only are there materialistic needs, but like you had mentioned, people just want to be listened to. People just want to be seen. These are forgotten folks.
Yeah, definitely. They really are. Again, like they reach out to us and they let us know like the circumstances they're in. Again, we don't require that, but they go ahead and they let it be known. And then we just take in part of what we have, we've collected and what we have in our inventory for things. And if we don't have it, then what we do is like we'll post it on Facebook and just put it out there for the community, letting them know, hey, this person's in need of this, said materials and whatnot. But what we'll never do is disclose who it is. We won't post pictures of who we helped. We keep all that confidential, just so that people can, obtain their dignity, because a lot of times they come to us in their time of need. So they don't need to be, blasted out there for, their circumstance and whatnot. And we don't do it to just sit here and post pictures of all the people that we've helped or anything. Like, we won't do that. However, what we will do is like post on there after we have helped the people. Mission accomplished, simply put,
I work with a lot of alcoholics. I'm a recovering alcoholic, 40 years. I work with a lot of people in substance abuse, and the most difficult thing in life is to ask for help.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you find that with your organization.
It is. It is. They have their, we all have to come to a point of humility at some point, I believe. But that doesn't mean we have to be humiliated by others. There are things that we do, for our own, that we have to break and bend for those things. And we have dealt with certain people who struggle to request our help, and then they just find it, they break. And they don't want to end up in a worse circumstance or whatnot than what they're in. So that's all we do, is just spread love and able to, to do our best to help said people and whatnot, And if we can't, then we definitely point them in the right direction of people who can, with our networking of other organizations and whatnot as well. We don't take complete credit for everything. It's like it's the community who's helping, and it's all these other organizations in the community that we network with to make things happen for these people.
You brought up
great appreciation.
You brought up a great point. You brought up a great point about humility, and I think Domingo, people have humility wrong. Humility is not being a doormat. No. And that's what people, general, if you ask people, well, what if somebody lives with humility, what does that mean? And that, a lot of people think that living with humility is passive and being a doormat. But no, in fact, if you live with humility, it makes you stronger, because you have the humility to know that you're not the end-all, be-all, and that you do need people and you do need help. And on the other side of humility, too, having the ability to have empathy for others and help others in need, that's also a definition of humility. And many people have that humility wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely they do. It's about, understanding your own circumstances, and again, like you said, empathizing with those who have been in your shoes or are going through your walk with you, or at that time, just having the empathy for them.
And Domingo, what made you do this in your life?
It started with Rudy and Veronica Villa, husband and wife. They're the ones who started the organization. She's always been a big part with giving, and it started with her parents, who were pastors of a church some time ago, retired now. But she's grown up in that atmosphere of always giving and helping, and she's just continued that, through her life and whatnot. And, she just felt the need to start an organization with things, and me just being a very close friend of hers, more like family, a sister, if you would, a brother and sister, of hers and Rudy, just being there to support them and support her dream of where she wants to go with things. It's like we're just regular, everyday, ordinary people with regular lives who, working class citizens who come out and understand that there's a need for people needing help, and that's just about it. And a lot of times you go to, not shaming or putting down other organizations at all. They're all great,
right?
But it's just sometimes it's a little bit harder to get the things you need from said other organizations because of they're funded by government or all this, different stuff, and they're only allowed so much to either be able to give out or so much information that they need, and then you have to have a waiting period for whatever, situation that it is. And a lot of times it's like, they run into those issues, whereas opposed to us, we don't have that. It's like we're not government funded. We do try to reach out for different grants and sponsorships from other businesses and whatnot, but we're not controlled by any of them. And also we do like raffles and taco sales and stuff, different raffles for different items, just whatever comes up or whatever we decide to put out there and whatnot, to help raise money to fund our organizations for the things that we have. It's not cheap, and it's coming out of our own pockets, of the things that we do to go out in the city and help people,
Yep. Hey, Domingo, we got about a minute left. If you could, if somebody wants to help, your organization or help you, how would they get involved?
They can help by going mainly through Facebook to going and friending us, and then we take volunteers, we take donations. We are looking for sponsorships and whatnot. Donations can be either material items, gift cards, or even just funds, to put towards, things that we need to be able to continue to help, grow our organization to help those in the community.
Yeah, and you're really grassroots, and so I would encourage people to if you want to get involved, this is a great organization, La Mision, and you're on Facebook, correct?
Yes, we are. We are on Facebook. We also have email, which is lamisionmichigan@gmail.com. That's LAMISION Michigan@gmail.com. We also have a phone number at 989-930-8826. And, they can call us, they can email us. We are at the MAC Center. We're working out of the MAC Center right now if they have donations to drop off, but we also pick up the donations if we have to. The MAC Center is on Washington across from Hoyt Park here in Saginaw.
All right, Domingo Delgado, thank you very much. Very grateful that you were on the show with us. La Mision, helping people, having the humility to ask for help and having the humility to help others. Sir, thank you very much for being on the show.
Thank you, Joe. I very much appreciate you. Thank you so much.
We'll be right back on Generating Gratitude here on WSGW. Welcome back to Generating Gratitude here on WSGW. Still Joe, still your host, and still better to be hateful than grateful than hateful. What am I saying? You know what I'm talking about, folks. Again, you can't be hateful and you can't be grateful at the same time. Grateful that my friend Brian is with us. Brian is an amazing story. Brian's story is, what is it, Brian? 2.5 years ago, you entered rehab, and now 2.5 years later, you're working for the rehab center. You get the keys to the rehab center. Tell us a little bit about your story, Brian.
Yeah, Joe. Thanks for having me. I mean, my story leading up to getting into rehab is not terribly unique when it comes to folks that have been through this. I spent about 4 decades of using and abusing alcohol and drugs to hide emotions, and eventually found myself at the doors of a treatment center that did a great deal for me. It introduced me to a 12-step program, and it was also a treatment center that promoted 100% abstinence from any mind-altering substance, which is what it turned out that I needed. But yeah, I got a new life, started a new life coming out of that treatment center, and came out of there having had the unique ability, being in the unique position of being completely helpless to drugs and alcohol, to starting a new life of being completely helpful to other people, and because of the way I was treated, with compassion and care at the facility I was at, it motivated me as I got better and better through months of sobriety, to where I wanted to help other people.
Now, Brian, how did you get to be an addict or an alcoholic? Where did it all start for you? I started when I was 14 and I started drinking. When did you start? And when did you suddenly realize that it became a problem?
I started out. I was a year ahead of you. I started out at 13. And I think like a lot of young people, I had I had suffered through some traumatic experiences when I was younger, and found that the first time I tried alcohol or drugs, it gave me a way of really hiding the emotions and the trauma that I had gone through, and it just made me feel more socially acceptable. When I first started, realizing I was starting to have a problem was probably I'd gone through high school and my 20s, still having a good time, I guess, as we'd say, with what I was doing. But my late 20s, I woke up one day and for the first time, it just sort of occurred to me that, I felt that I needed to have a drink instead of wanting one.
Yeah, you reach that point where this stuff can't go on. Now, I know when I drank, Brian, it made me popular and I could talk to girls, or so I thought. You mentioned starting at 13. It's interesting when I talk to some folks that started in their teens, that normal people don't really understand that substance abuse, alcoholism can start as young as, like, you were 13, I was 14. It's interesting because, the normal people would think that, mid-20s, maybe in college. But no, you can start 13 and 14.
Absolutely, and I've heard other people's stories starting, as early as 7 or 8 years old.
Yeah, that is possible. But when did you know you were an alcoholic? Because I knew I was an alcoholic. Or when did you know you were an addict? I knew when I was 16, 17. I couldn't do anything about it. It's that substance overtakes your mind, and it's like somebody else. You're in a car that somebody else is driving, and you can't really control it. That was my experience. Did you have the same thing?
I did, but it really did happen a little later in life for me. I think I began, sort of jokingly saying I was an alcoholic in my mid-20s, early 20s. And I could have been in denial, but I remember specifically, I was about 29 years old and woke up one morning. I'd been bartending for a little while, and I woke up one morning and just felt the need to have a drink as soon as I got up. That was the first time I think I really noticed.
Now
and I went to somebody.
Sorry,
go ahead.
That need, physical need, mental need, or both? You just woke up and I can't go on without a drink.
I think it was both. I really do. But physically, it was the first time physically that I felt I needed to have a drink. And that was the first sign, I think, that I was starting to lose control.
And people don't understand that sometimes. I guess the closest way I get to equate it is if you've ever were a smoker and all of a sudden you're just jonesing for a cigarette, where everything just stops and the focus is all on that. And at 29, you woke up that morning, and then what happened?
I was bartending at the time, and I was working for a couple who were, had gotten to be good friends of mine. They were actually friends of mine prior to working for them, and the owner's wife happened to be the one working that night. And I went to her shortly after I got there, and I said, "Look, I don't know what's going on, but, I think I'm starting to have a problem with this drinking thing. And her advice was, well, maybe you should just slow down. And right. And the words immediately came out of my mouth, I don't think I can. And she was a first generation immigrant from Germany. And, had told me that she'd been drinking at the dinner table since she was 5 years old. It was part of her family's culture to drink. So I'm not sure she understood where I was coming from.
Yeah, most normal people is, well, why don't you just quit? Why don't you just quit? Yeah, that's like telling a bird not to fly or a fish not to swim. Why don't you just stop swimming, fish? Yeah, alcoholic.
Right.
Just stop drinking.
Yeah.
Just quit.
Yeah, and over the years, I'd hear that more than a few times. As my alcoholism progressed and got worse. And I believe it was my mother one day said, "Well, why can't you just quit?" And my answer was simply, "I don't know." And that was a scary moment. I don't know.
I don't know. Great talk with Brian. We'll continue our talk with Brian from rehab to now working at the rehab center. An inspiring story. Very grateful that Brian is with us. We'll continue our conversation here on Generating Gratitude on WSGW.
Now it's time for more great moments in gratitude with your host, Joe Volk.
Welcome back to Generating Gratitude here on WSGW. Conversation with Brian, from patient to professional is the best way I can describe it. Brian, before we went to break, your mother asked you why you couldn't just quit. And that's one of the things, and you're working now in the recovery field. That's a common question that I found that was asked to me for a while, but to people that are in active addiction, why can't you just quit?
At some point, the addiction takes complete control of your life. It took control of my life. Everything that I did from the time I woke up to the time I generally blacked out at night was controlled by alcohol. Mentally, physically, spiritually broken. I didn't do anything throughout the day that didn't involve my trying, to either get alcohol, drink alcohol, consume alcohol. And the problems that created throughout the day was just amazing. It was a lot of hard work I had to put into each individual day, it seemed like, to try and control everything around me because I was controlled by alcohol.
Normal people don't understand. The best way I can explain how addiction is I use my bowling analogy. Now, I could go bowling once a year and take it or leave it. I could throw one bowling ball in the alley and never bowl again for the rest of my life. That's normal people with drinking. Hey, okay, yeah, take it or leave. As an alcoholic, it's not that I can take it or leave it. I need it now. It's an integral part of my life. Normal people don't plan their drinking. And as an alcoholic, okay, now when I get home tonight, I need a drink. I've never said, now when I get home tonight, I need to go bowling. But with like drinking, it's like, okay, I got to drink tonight. Is that about how alcohol and drugs control people's thinking?
Yeah, absolutely. And even to expand on your bowling analogy, not only do you feel the need that you have to bowl, eventually your arm is going to get so tired, your elbow's going to wear out, your arm's going to end up in a cast, and you're still going to have to bowl.
Gotta bowl!
Right. Your fingers can fall off, and you're going to find a way to hold the ball a different way in order to bowl. That's precisely what, drinking was for me.
Now, how many times did you try rehab before it stuck? Were you a multi-time trier, or was the first shot?
No, I was, as I like to say, the first time I was cured from alcohol was when I went to a detox facility the first time for 72 hours. And came out and thinking that was all I needed. I'm going to just go to a few meetings and everything will be fine. I probably went to detox 3 other times and rehab 5 or 6 times before I had finally gotten to the point where I guess I had finally reached my bottom, as we say, and decided, this is something that I absolutely have to have, and I have to apply myself to.
And hitting bottom is very important. I did a show last week on just were people's bottoms, where you reach that point, that desperate point in life, and desperation is a great word for that, where it just can't go on anymore like this. It's a critical moment where you tell yourself, I'm either going to get better or I'm going to die. And I don't think that I'm over exaggerating that get better or I'm going to die moment.
Yeah, absolutely. Because that was to the point where I was. My bottom for me was taking a legitimate attempt on my own life. I attempted suicide and ended up on life support in a local hospital for several days because the thought of living was more terrifying than dying to me at that point. I just couldn't take it anymore. I woke up out of the ICU, being pushed in a wheelchair into the psych ward, and thinking to myself, what do I do now? Because I hadn't thought that far ahead at that point.
What's that like? What's that like? You tried to end your own life, and thank goodness you were not very good at it. And
right.
And you come out of it. What are the emotions? Were you upset that you weren't successful? Were you just like total surrender? Were you angry? What were some of those emotions?
I think all of those things. I was confused. Why am I still here? I remember being in an outpatient therapy group not a few months later than that, and the leader of the group asked us, to write down what was our most disappointing day of the previous year, and mine was waking up from my suicide attempt. As horrible as that sounds.
Oh no! Were you mad at God? Were you mad that why don't you just let me end this? Why do you drag this on?
Mad at God, I'm not sure, but I was certainly mad at myself.
Okay.
Just one more failure to that point. Yeah, I was mad at myself.
And so you you get sent to the psych ward. How long did you stay angry?
Probably a few days, 2 or 3 days. When, again, like I was thinking when I got there, what do I do now? I'm going to do one of two things. I'm either going to make another attempt at rehab, because I'd actually been there a few years prior and had gotten some good things out of it. So I was either going to do that again, or option B was going back home knowing I'd start drinking, and probably not within a day or maybe a week or a month. But, putting, just completely and totally ending it all. Because I knew if I left there and went home, I was going to go back to drinking, and that was going to lead me back down the same path that was just unacceptable to me.
And that, where you were at, that's the total definition of powerless.
Yes.
Right there. Either if I go home, I'm going to die.
Yeah, absolutely. I was completely powerless and helpless at that point.
So what changed? What changed? What made the switch, what was that moment that you go from powerless and angry to, okay, let's do something about this?
Boy, I don't know. Again, I had been to that rehab facility a few years prior, and I had heard things that I hadn't heard before. And I don't know. I guess I was just grasping for one little piece of hope, because at that point I really was kind of hopeless, and I don't know.
That's okay,
just
man.
Decided to pick up the phone and make that call.
And we're glad that you did. Brian, my guest here on Generating Gratitude. We're going to take another short break, and then when we get back, we'll talk about the good stuff, Brian's recovery and Brian's position at the rehabilitation center. Again, it's an amazing story. You're listening to Generating Gratitude here on WSGW. Welcome back to Generating Gratitude here on WSGW. Brian, my guest. Brian tried to take his own life. He was angry. He's in the psych ward, and then just decided to turn it around. Brian, what did you do initially to start getting sober?
Well, I definitely couldn't do anything on my own. I had to, for me, I had to go to a rehab facility and seek help. I'm glad I made the decision that I did. The care there was extraordinary. The people there were compassionate, and extremely helpful with me and helping me get through, each and every hour of the day, and helping me get better.
You bring up a great point about each hour of the day, because when you first make that decision, life is an hour by hour process. I don't know if anybody else has ever lived that way, but if I could just get to the next hour. And emotions are volatile, and they change, and the goal, we say in the program, one day at a time. When you're first new like that, it really is, Brian, 1 hour at a time.
Yeah, absolutely. And something called post-acute withdrawal syndrome was something I was going through pretty heavily when I got there. Though I had detoxed from alcohol and drugs for probably 10 days or so by the time I even got to rehab. I was still suffering from post-acute withdrawal. And I could be just fine in a great mood 1 minute and a complete shaking, shivering, emotional wreck the next.
Yes. Been there.
And fortunately, unfortunately, I was in a place where, that was just common, and they saw that all the time and knew how to help me get through those moments.
Yeah, you mentioned it, very important too. People that understand that, because if you tried that in the real world, people would just, oh, you're nuts.
Yeah, and they wouldn't be wrong.
Right, right. So you go through treatment and you get out of treatment. What do you do when you go through treatment? You get out of treatment. How did you start that reintroduction into the real world after you're in the rehab center, and now you got to go out in the world, and the world sometimes can be a scary place after being sheltered a little bit in the rehab center. Right.
While I was in there, we developed a plan for my recovery. It was I went directly from rehab into a sober living house and spent 7 months there. While I was there, I was going to outpatient therapy. I was seeing a therapist. I was going to groups. I was talking to a recovery coach. I had gotten a sponsor for my 12-step program. Went to meetings. Basically, what I did is everything that was suggested to me from the 12-step program that I was involved with. They suggested 90 meetings in 90 days. I went to 140.
Yep.
I
did
came
110.
Out of rehab.
So
yeah, I came out of rehab and hitting the ground running. Because I had started to feel, while I was in rehab and before I got into sober living, I was starting to feel gratitude and emotions and things that I had never felt my entire adult life. It had been 40 years between my first drink and my last. And I was feeling emotions that I'd never felt before, and that was something new and really freeing and gratifying.
And so you recover, and now you got a job at the rehab center. What do you do at the rehab center?
I get to go in there and just, get to spend time with people that were just like me when I got there. Kind of emotional wrecks and not sure what direction they're going. And, I get to be a part of someone in early recovery, like someone was with me. Other people were with me. And I guess the reason I really want to do it is because, I had all of those years of feeling helpless and hopeless. And having been sober now for about 2.5 years, and the amazing life that I'm able to have today, I just want to show them that, it's possible. If I can do this, absolutely anyone can.
Yeah, it must be really, talk about gratitude. Instead of using the patient entrance, now you use the employee entrance.
Right.
You bring up a great point about the power of community. There's a saying that I get drunk, we stay sober. And you're a great example, Brian, of that power of community. We need other people to help us, and we need to help other people.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose early on I didn't quite understand that as part of the program, as helping each other. I was never a terribly social person, certainly not sober. and having that social circle and all these people, like-minded people that I get to be around on a regular basis, is the most important thing in my life. Having so many friends when I had so few.
Yeah, we need others, and there's no better helper for somebody in substance abuse and recovering than somebody who's been there. Somebody like you, Brian, that is, that did attempt to end your life, that knows what that's like. You don't have to explain yourself. You just know it, right?
Right. We can identify with each other on a level that we can't with say family. You can't just go into a family Thanksgiving and say and talk about, hey, I attempted suicide 2.5 years ago. It's not a real good conversation starter in a family group, but with like-minded people, there's a lot of understanding. Maybe I haven't done that, but I know I was close to it.
Right. We can laugh about it. We can laugh about what we did. I have about a minute left, Brian. If you could, in a minute, summarize your gratitude. What are you grateful for?
I am grateful for the program that helps me get through absolutely every minute of every day today, and has helped improve my life beyond my dreams. I've got a great deal of gratitude for the people involved in that program that I get to see every day. And I'm grateful to be in a position to where maybe, I can do something today to help somebody else feel like I do today, and have the experience and great life that I do today.
Yeah, you're an amazing story, Brian. Entering the rehab center as a patient 2.5 years later, now they give you the keys to the place, right?
Who'd have thought?
Who'd have thunk it? Who'd have thunk how good it could be? Very grateful. Thank you, Brian, for being on the show today.
All right. Thank you for having me, Joe.
You're listening to Generating Gratitude here on WSGW. And there's one thing that guys like Brian and other folks who in recovery that we talk to really prove this every day. You can't be hateful and you can't be grateful at the same time. I say that a lot, but I really mean it, because when you live with gratitude, you're looking for the good things. You're not whitewashing the bad things, but, you've got one or two ways to look at stuff. You can look at the good stuff, or, anybody can sit there and point out the flaws. Anybody can be hateful. Anybody can criticize others. When you're grateful, you help others. When you're hateful, you're just angry. And that anger is kind of like punching yourself in the face and expecting others to feel it. Thanks again for listening to Generating Gratitude here on WSGW. Thanks again to our friends at Connoisseur Media who let me do this every week. And we look forward to talking to you next time.